Hello everyone, I'm Mike DeAngelo with That's Entertainment, and this is your video review of Donkey Kong Country Returns by Retro Studios. This is the year of the revival, with games like Splatterhouse and Medal of Honor seemingly rising up from the dead and taking shape once again with new potential. Combining that with Nintendo's system of unprecedented success made new forays into old territory quite justifiable. We've already seen old franchises from the company resurrected over the past couple of years, with games like Punch-Out and Wario Land Shake It. Nintendo is even letting an angel take flight again early next year on the 3DS with Kid Icarus. But they're going back to their roots in some ways with one of their oldest and most memorable series of all time. On the Super Nintendo, Donkey Kong Country set some pretty high bars for platforming. Visually astounding and with gameplay elements that were clever and tricky, but not beyond the realm of possibility, the series was perhaps one of the strongest offerings on the system. Retro Studios takes over where Red left off, giving the Simian his first core experience since the Nintendo 64. But, is this game built on good ideals or simple nostalgia? Things are pretty simple as far as Donkey Kong plots go. You can't take Returns to Roger Ebert and try to convince him that yes, video games are art, though you'll see that this game is visually pleasing enough to argue that anyway. Nintendo doesn't stretch the boundaries of their storytelling unless you're looking at Zelda or Metroid, and this release by Retro is no exception. Following the lead of the SNES Kong games, DK's stash of bananas is apprehended yet again, though this time not by the Kremlings and their leader K. Rool, who are absent from this game in everything but subtle nods. In fact, the only returning characters besides Donkey and Diddy are Rambi the Rhino, Squawks the Parrot, and Cranky Kong. Instead, the plot moves along thanks to the Tikis, the new villains of this game, who hypnotize the wildlife of Donkey Kong Country and use them against the two protagonists. There's more to the story, especially pertaining to the reason that the bananas were stolen, but I'll let you discover those reasons on your own. While the structure of Returns is familiar, Retro made some huge strides to make this game their own, and not just a piggyback off of Rare's original Rebirth. You'll still utilize DK, who you'll always control, though obtaining Diddy Kong does help with certain things, such as crossing over pits and hovering over top of dangerous enemies. You can't control Diddy directly, unless you're playing multiplayer. Instead, Diddy's inclusion gives DK an extra buffing of hearts, which replace the one-hit kills of the original series. In the absence of the Kremlings, the Tikis have sent all kinds of animals to do their dirty work for them. Parrots, crabs, and frogs hop and shamble forward like typical Goombas, but they can still cause problems if you don't take their threat seriously. The Tikis themselves show up to some extent, but they are usually as passive as the rest of the bunch. There are some new mechanics to the game. One slightly annoying addition is the blowing mechanic. DK can hunch over and blow on random environmental objects, which sometimes yield daintier rewards. It's also used to some extent on enemies, but it seems like a poor inclusion, especially when considering the rare but still noticeable controller hiccups. Sometimes you'll attempt a ground pound, only to find that you just led DK rolling off a cliff into shark-infested ocean instead. This choice is extra weird from Retro when you realize that they did away with a great deal of content from the original series. As with the aforementioned absence of the Kremlings, the cast of characters has been greatly reduced. You'll no longer take flights from Funky or save with Candy. Even the later playable characters, Dixie and Kiddy Kong, are conspicuously absent here. But they aren't the only ones who haven't made the final cut. You'll no longer be riding ostriches, spiders, or swordfishes. In fact, you won't even face a single underwater level, as Retro felt that they hindered the pace of the game too much. That is one of the things that you'll notice going into this title. Retro faithfully worked towards delivering a game that was fresh-faced and designed cleverly, rather than focusing on characters that added mechanics sporadically. You'll still see some old favorites, like minecart levels, as well as some new ideas, like a rocket-propelled barrel. But, for the most part, this game was reworked top to bottom. As I said earlier, Returns is visually expressive in a way that most games can only dream of. The art style here is one of the most compelling and well-done examples of art direction that spans across all three next-generation consoles. The levels have humongous backdrops, and often you visit them, jumping from the foreground to the background through the now iconic barrels. There are other impressive art choices that are made as well, like waves that are reminiscent of the first level of Super Ghouls and Ghosts, which will flatten you like a pancake and still look good doing it. There's even some wonderfully crafted silhouette levels that are so simple yet so striking, and to such good effect. The sound isn't anything to get too excited about, as not too much has changed. However, that same thought lends itself wonderfully to the music. You'll feel like you're already familiar with the soundtrack, even though there have been some remixes made. The tunes you hear in the game are the kinds that can get stuck in your head for hours after you turn off the console. Nintendo and its subsidiaries are quickly becoming firm supporters of replayability in their games. Thankfully, Donkey Kong Country Returns follows the trend. The first thing that Retro did, which was a blessing in this day and age, was make the game deceptively hard. It would be a wonder if you managed to beat this game without a game over, and you'd have to be some kind of savant to do it without losing a single life. Luckily, if the game is a little above your level, you can rely on the Super Guide to carry you through the level, allowing you to enjoy the rest of the game. Beyond the difficulty, there are a lot of hidden items and hard-to-reach places that fill every level. Even obtaining the letters that spell out Kong are sometimes a head-scratcher, and this adds to the value of this game in a way that isn't overly annoying. Multiplayer is different this time around compared to the SNES releases. Instead of tag-teaming through the levels, both players control one of the Kong clans simultaneously. This is a nice touch, as one player isn't mindlessly staring at the screen for his turn, but it can also end up being hazardous, as the Kongs work much better in tandem than separately. Luckily, if you do manage to become separated, you rocket forward to your ally immediately, and if a single player dies, he can come back in a floating barrel, similar to the way characters came back in Bubbles in New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Not only does this release show that Nintendo's oldest franchises are still relevant, but it also shows that its partner, Retro Studios, is not just a one-series wonder. If they impressed you with their foray into the Metroid universe, they'll blow you away when it comes to Donkey Kong. Barring some minor grievances with the controls, this game is spectacular. It has a beckoning call, and once it has you in its grip, it's very difficult to overcome its addiction. That's Entertainment awards Donkey Kong Country Returns a score of 9.5 out of 10.